When you think of the Bible, it's easy to picture this one giant, kind of intimidating book, right? But what if it isn't a single book at all? What if it's more like a library, a whole collection of different works, all put together with a very specific blueprint? Well, today, we're going to walk through that blueprint and see exactly how this ancient library is structured. It all starts with this number right here, 66. And no, that's not a page number. That's the number of individual books you'll find inside the collection we call the Bible. 66 unique scrolls and letters, written over centuries of history, all housed together under one cover. So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to lay out that library blueprint. Then we'll take a tour of its two main wings, the Old and New Testaments. We'll even get to peek at the different kinds of books, the genres, on the shelves of each wing. And finally, we're going to uncover the single, unifying theme that holds this entire collection together. All right, first up, let's really lean into this idea of a library. Because thinking about the Bible this way, it's the absolute key to understanding its structure. This isn't just about reading a book from cover to cover. It's about knowing how to navigate a vast and really varied collection of writings. Okay, so this diagram right here, this is our master key. This one image from our source material basically maps out the entire structure we're about to dive into. You can see the two big sections, the different genres, and even how they're all connected. We're going to break this thing down piece by piece so we can really get the logic behind how this library is set up. Any good library is organized into main sections, right? Well, this one's no different. The first and biggest division splits the whole thing into two wings, the Old and New Testaments. And getting a handle on this basic divide is the very first step to navigating the entire library. Wow, okay. This chart really puts things into perspective, doesn't it? You've got the Old Testament with a whopping 39 books. It's the bigger, much older part of the library. Then the New Testament is a bit more compact with 27 books. So what does that mean? It means about 2/3 of the entire biblical story was written before the events of the New Testament even kick off. Pretty amazing when you think about it. So what's the real difference between these two wings anyway? Well, according to our diagram, it all comes down to direction. The Old Testament, which was originally written in Hebrew and Aramaic, is the story that, as the diagram says, points to Christ. It's all about building that anticipation. Then you have the New Testament, written in Greek, which tells of Christ. It's the payoff, the fulfillment of everything that came before. You can see it perfectly with the arrows here. One points forward, building up to a huge moment, and the other explains that moment and everything that happened because of it. All right, so let's take a walk into that first bigger wing of the library. How are those 39 books of the Old Testament actually organized? What kind of genres are we going to find on these shelves? So the Old Testament isn't just a jumble of books. It's carefully organized by genre. It kicks off with the 5 books of the law, which set up the whole foundational story. Then you get 12 books of history that tell the nation of Israel's journey. After that, there's a beautiful section of 5 books of poetry, full of wisdom and songs. And finally, you have a huge collection of prophetic books. And by the way, they're divided into major and minor just based on their length, not how important they are. Okay, now let's cross the hall to the second wing of our library, the New Testament. It's definitely a smaller collection at just 27 books, but it has its own really clear and logical layout. Just like the Old Testament, the New Testament is broken down into 5 sections. It starts with the 4 Gospels, which are basically biographies of Jesus' life. Then the book of Acts gives us a history of how the early church got started. Now, the bulk of this section is made up of epistles, which are just letters. 13 were written by the Apostle Paul to different churches and people, and 8 were more general letters from other apostles. And the whole library, the entire collection, wraps up with one final book of prophecy, the book of Revelation. Okay, so we've pulled the library apart, looked at all the shelves, but what's the glue that holds it all together? I mean, is there really a single thread that connects all 66 of these books, written by so many different people over thousands of years? Let's find out. So let's go back to our master diagram for a second. We've looked at all the pages, the different testaments, but now, check out what's holding them all together, the spine and the foundation. According to this visual, this is where we find the central unifying idea of the whole library. And right there, written on the spine, you see 2 words, law and gospel. Now, this isn't just some random label. The diagram is telling us that this is the thematic glue.
This is the big idea that connects the laws and promises of the Old Testament with the gospel, or good news, of the New Testament, making it one single connected story.
So this really paints the picture of the complete story arc. You've got the Old Testament over here pointing forward, building that suspense. Then the New Testament comes in and tells the story. But look at the arrows. This is key. Both sections are flowing toward one single point, one climax, the cross. It's presented as the absolute center of the entire 66-book story. So what's the big takeaway from all this? Is that even though we're talking about 66 different books, this visual presents the Bible as one single unified library. Yeah, it's huge and it's diverse, but according to this blueprint, there's one central story that ties every single part together.
And that really brings us to a final thought: how to seeing the Bible this way, not as one giant imposing book, but as this organized library with different wings and shelves and genres. How does that change the way you might think about reading it?